I think we are live. How you doing over there, Al? You doing all right?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks so much for having me on this. I last time I saw you, we were at the family mastermind. It was great.
That was a good time. That
It
was
was
a
great.
really good time. When was that? That was October, September,
Yeah, like
October.
late September, October, and we just had a great time being there. First time meeting you.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Yeah, you got out there, and were you there when Vanilla got up there and performed?
Oh yeah. Vanello just let it rip on stage, and everybody was up there. I wasn't on stage or anything, but like I got to see it live, so it was good.
Yeah, it was a quick experience. I didn't know that he was in the home flipping business.
Yeah, I didn't know how deep he was with real estate until he posted something in the mastermind group and talked about how he'd been doing it a while. And it's always interesting hearing those stories, especially celebrities getting into it. So, hey, everybody's getting into real estate no matter what it is.
Yeah. Now, how about why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background a little bit, and are you originally from Florida? I'll go ahead and let you take it.
Yeah, originally from Florida, from Miami. When I was in school and everything, actually, I was a music major. That's why you see the violin in the background. I played music for 15 years, played violin, and I actually went to school for it. Went to undergrad, University of Miami for it, and music was in my whole world for so long. And after a while, I knew it wasn't going to be the profession that was either going to make a lot of money or it was just a really hard area to get into, whether it was being soloist or orchestras. So shifted my focus to law, go figure. And I thought I would take the music world and the law world with my personality and my background and being able to like get up in front of people. And I thought, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll go into law. So was in law school. I wanted to do entertainment law. And after 2 years, I realized, wow, that world is also you got to know to get into that world. And in the entertainment world, it was just so tiny, so small, so niche that there was just so much else out there. And after school, I just took any job I could. So when I was in Miami, I ended up taking being under shadowing an attorney that his son, we were in a quartet together in high school, so we all knew each other. He said, hey, let me show you the ropes, let me get into it. And so at the time he was doing foreclosure defense, so that was my first time getting into real estate, was seeing like some of this foreclosure stuff. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was a really interesting world. I was going to court, I was just getting my feet wet. And
Was
at the time,
was
yeah.
that when the last in, like the 2008 collapse? Is that when you got into that?
Yeah, so at the point I was at, it was like 2015,
Okay.
2016. There was more 2016, but that was kind of more at the end of when every case law, everything was coming out, like just tons of things were happening at the time still. So we were always going to court, mediation, and at that time, Mark, is when there was a little bit of a flash of probate, a little bit of a dabble of probate, and I started seeing a little bit more of it, not heavily. And it was interesting at the time. And after about 2 years, I mean there's a whole story of how I even got into probate. So really first step was I was in foreclosure world. And then the probate world was um came across this niche with probate with one of my best friends. And I remember he came down to Miami. It's still the craziest story of how it happened. Comes to Miami, comes to visit me, and before he leaves, he's just like, "Hey, there's a niche." And he's a lawyer too. We went to law school together, and he's like, "There's a real niche out here for probate." And I'm like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I've seen it with foreclosure." He's like, "Well, there's just tons of probate out there." And so at the time, I'm thinking, "Oh, okay, like maybe I'll figure what's going on." So a year goes by, I try figuring it out, and nothing really came of it. I still didn't understand it at the time. I still didn't get what it is, why it is, all of that stuff. And a year goes by, he comes back down, and he says, "What did you find out?" And I said, I still don't get it. I still don't get it." And so he's like, "If you realize how many pieces of property just sit there, that have never gone through probate. Nobody's ever done anything. The heirs just sit there sitting on equity, and they can't do anything without going through that probate process. You wouldn't believe how many there are. And at that time, it clicked that there were just thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of property in Florida that just sit there, have never gone through anything. And so that's when it really took off after school, after being in Miami, moved to Jacksonville. I never thought I was moving to Jacksonville. And I never saw it coming until there was an opportunity to move up here at a firm, basically kind of take that same thought process and plug it in Jacksonville. And for a while, it didn't click. After I was trying to explain it to some people, get it out there, and at the time, it really wasn't clicking. And sometime about a year in, when I started speaking and going and doing presentations, is when all of a sudden it just started clicking, and the whole thing spread like wildfire. And Mark, from going from being a music major to being a lawyer to being in real estate law to being in a completely interesting niche world of real estate has been just an insane journey to get there, and now just exploding like crazy, just spreading it, going to not even Jacksonville but Tampa, Orlando, over in the Panhandle, South Florida, and just taking off with it. It's been a wild ride of how I've been able to get here, and we can dive in on so many things that you want to talk about, but this is definitely a great conversation to have.
No, I'm glad you actually are coming on. It'd be good for a lot of our listeners, in my creative real estate financing group, investing. And then also, I'm part of the Real Estate Power Play podcast. So it's great for some of these listeners to kind of understand a little bit about probate. The other day I posted a question like how everybody gets their leads. And one of the investors I know really well, Cole down in the Dallas area, he loves probate. He does extremely well, even though it takes a little bit longer. The payouts are much more gigantic. And so once you talk a little bit like how as a real estate investor, how we can go about trying to find probate leads, and then like the pros and cons of it. I'll let you get into that.
Yeah, so there's so many different ways you can get into it, and that's the beauty of the public record system. There's just so many different avenues you can go down. Of course, you can start with foreclosures. Foreclosures involve probate where the person owned that property, they had a mortgage on the property. Well, it's only in foreclosure because they forgot to pay, they can't pay, or they're dead. And so that's a lead on probate. And the lead there is pretty interesting because that person that owned that property, they probably live there, and they may have had kids, may have had a spouse, may have had somebody that is a relative of theirs that may not have been living there. They may have lived out of state, maybe in Ohio or New York or California, with no attachment to that property. So, all of a sudden, Mark Monroe comes along and says, "Hey, I see your property's in foreclosure. I understand that you may be inheriting that property because it's not in your name, but you are potentially an heir. It's up for auction. It's in foreclosure. It's about to go to a public auction. Um, I'd be happy to look at it. Here's what I'm offering. It may be more than what you get at auction. It may be more than what you're able to get somewhere else. Who knows?" And that opportunity to them is, well, they didn't know about it. Maybe they didn't know about it. Maybe they knew about it, but they don't know how to deal with it. And you're offering that ability for you to come in to even get them something. So the pre-foreclosure world, whether it's even been started, maybe you're finding the notices of default, and a lot of people, the records are everywhere, especially Florida, but the records are everywhere. And I know why people like it in Texas, because it's a probate friendly state too. It's a good state where you can figure out situations. But foreclosure's one, and Liz Pendens is another way. Liz Pendens, it's in foreclosure. Another way is maybe it's on the auction block, and auction blocks mean it's about to go to a sale. Those are good because those are calls to action. That means they got to do something to try to get with you, get under contract, get the property closed before it hits the auction. Otherwise, you can't. Now it's gone to auction, you lose the property. The other ways are the tax delinquents. So there's two types. You have the tax certificates, and then you have the tax deeds, because that's what Florida is: tax certificate, tax deed, tax lien, tax deed. So with the tax certificates, the only reason that that property's got a tax certificate because somebody didn't pay the taxes and then the next year it goes on the list is they forgot to pay, they can't pay their debt. And so that certificate would roll into next year, and that certificate rolls into the next year. So if there's a certificate, it could be an indicator maybe somebody just can't afford it or they're deceased. And so when it goes so long, and actually it gets on the tax deed list, now it's going up for auction. And the tax deed auctions, when it's about to hit the auction, those are also really good because usually with tax deeds there's equity in the property. Usually there's not a mortgage, and if there's a mortgage that sits with that property, maybe that mortgage company hasn't paid the taxes, so their mortgage is just sitting there. It's crazy to think that a mortgage would be sitting on a tax deed property. But you have that as a good call to action. So many others. I mean,
So
even yeah.
let me ask you a question on
Yeah.
that. Like, how would somebody, a newbie investor, or even somebody that's a veteran, because I know not even a lot of veterans go after probate. They love probate when it falls in their lap, but how would they search for those type of tax delinquents to be able to find those type of leads?
Some of the ways that you can for the tax certificates is the county, some counties put out an Excel spreadsheet. So like if you go to, let's just say Jacksonville's pretty like loose about it. They'll actually on their website, you type in like I think Duval County tax certificate list or tax delinquent list. Eventually you'll find a page where you can pull a full PDF. Now, a full Excel spreadsheet. Now, whether you know how to navigate through the Excel spreadsheet after it crashes your computer 3 times is something different. But then the other thing is some counties are really good about, you can go to them, you can go to their clerk, or you could go to their property appraiser or departments and even ask how you do it. Sometimes it's a matter of actually going in and being able to go get the records. And a lot of people don't know that not everything is online, not everything is accessible through the official record stuff, but sometimes it's a matter of actually going into the courthouse, getting in there and asking, what do you think? It's all about communicating, asking and finding out how you get in and get it is one thing. So many different ways. Sometimes the death certificates are recorded, so you can find out maybe and cross reference those properties with properties that people own. Um, just different things, even nuisance liens and demolition liens, code enforcement violations. Sometimes those are important because if the grass is super tall, nobody's cut the grass in a while, maybe nobody lives there, it's abandoned, so abandoned property, vacant homes. Well, it's a vacant house. Well, why is it vacant? Either they left or somebody died. And so we've seen so many scenarios, even fire damage. Sometimes the fire damage homes, they abandoned them and then they go somewhere else, but maybe they still own it. They still own that property. We even saw one today that was just really interesting where, and some people don't even know they own this, like the heirs don't even know. We saw one where this guy owned a property in another county, but he also somehow came up on another record in a different county, but he's not on that deed. His wife is. And so what we figured out through the puzzle is that through his wife, he inherited that property and the one that was in another county. Now the investor's picking up two properties just from that one scenario. So you never know when you're going to find that opportunity that comes up. And a lot of times you may go under contract, Mark, with a seller, and you bring it to title, and title says, whoa, 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 something's got to be done from 1980. And then you got to go back and fix it. There's just so many different ways, pre-probates, inheritance leads, everything.
Yeah, actually, we just closed on a property, and it's so funny. The grandfather passed away, left it to the father. Then the father passed away, left it to the son. The son thought he owned this thing for 5 years, and meanwhile, what happened was the grandfather passed it along between the siblings, the father and the other two. So they had to go through, and it was a whole process. It took about I don't know, about 45 days to get it all cleaned up. And meanwhile, this one person, he thought he owned it, really only owned a third of it, but everybody signed off on it, and it kind of got all cleared up. So it worked out pretty well. Now,
Wow.
you mentioned something about going under contract. You know, talk a little bit about that, because I've heard stories like you go into contract and the contract may not even be valid because you don't have it under the proper name.
Yeah, so many times if you find that probate, many times it could be that person that died, their residence, their primary residence. And when that happens and it's their primary, what you're looking at is in the world of Florida and homestead, it's considered that person's homestead property, meaning any true heir, however far down the line it goes or by will, any true heir is gonna get be entitled to that homestead property. So let's just say the mom passes, the father predeceases, and there's four kids ever, and all four are alive, and they say to you, Mark, we're ready, we want to do this. Well, in the theory of Florida, technically they're the true heir, they get title to that property. But really the true title doesn't transfer till the probate's done. So yes, you could go under contract with them. Could it be enforceable? Debatable, because they're not on paper on title, because when the transfer happens, they're now on a deed, really. And then once they're there, once they're on that order, now it becomes that contract is enforceable. So the idea is that you have everybody on board. And that's why when you find those situations where you have property where all those people are there, you really want everybody, because the bigger picture is not the probate, it's the title company. The title company wants to make sure that once that probate's done, you go to close, they're going to want deeds. So if they want deeds, if one of those heirs doesn't sign and the probate's done, they don't sign that deed, you're not closing. And that's the importance of it. So it's, yeah, is it enforceable? It's not, could be, not really, but it's still the idea that now you have everybody's on board, title moves, now you go to close, done.
Nice. So give us a kind of like walk us through the process as an investor. Like, all right, we found this deal, it's a probate lead. So what's the process look like? Like, how would they work with you?
So the what happens is a couple of things. Either title comes back through a title commitment randomly without even having spoken with me. Title comes back and says that probate's required. That situation, that investor could say, okay, look, we know Al will wait until the closing to get paid for attorney's fees and the whole thing to be done. So I'll wait until the end to get paid, nothing needed up front, get it done, and we move forward. So that air one, just you need one of them, just need one of them to start it, and everybody on board, right? One to start, everybody on board, they reach out, and that's when we figure out the puzzle, right? Because a lot of times they'll tell you a different story than they tell me. I don't know why that happens, but it somehow happens. Once I start asking that line of questions, we find out that it's 3, 4 probates. So we have to break it down. And on the investor side, you're doing your normal thing, Mark. You're doing your inspection, you're doing your due diligence. You want to make sure that we don't find out later there's a second mortgage and there's $20,000 in back taxes. So you're not doing really anything different on your end other than locking it up, making sure everybody's on board. They're reaching out to figure out what we got to do, and maybe gathering some other key critical documents. For example, the one that I picked up with the 2 probates I explained, we found out that the brother who has no connection as an heir actually has all the documents, and the investor somehow talked to him. So he has all the death certificates, he has all the names, all the contacts, emails, and so that's helping. So being able to facilitate who has that helps. Being able to get anything the title company needs to prep that deal helps. And then I'm just getting done what we need to on our end to pump it out. And then once we get what we need, we work with the title company, say, here you go. This is what's needed to close. They update title, boom, done. So it's really not a whole different process than anything you normally do. You're just dealing with more people and you're dealing with a puzzle, and that's what we're figuring out.
That's great. No, that's great. I like that stuff. Yeah, one of my really good friends, actually, Gabe, he's actually does a part of our Power Play podcast. He actually, one of his biggest spreads ever was through a probate deal. And I think his spread on that deal, once he purchased it, went in and fixed it up, I think he cleared about $170,000 just on that particular one. So, and it was a
Wow.
probate. It did take a little bit of time, but he just, that was a really nice deal on him. What's the average time going through a probate process?
So every county is different with their systems, and that's what we learned even in 2021 and going into this year was each county, now that I've just spread all over Florida, it varies. So if we're talking you're in Jacksonville and it's straightforward, everybody on board, not a whole lot of things to do, you could be looking at 2 to 4 weeks. If you're going into like Ocala, into Marion County, you could be looking at like 2 to 3 weeks. If you 2 sorry, 2 to 3 months. And then if you're going into Volusia County, you could be looking at 2 to 4 weeks. So each county varies. Pinellas would be different. Hillsborough, Tampa, you could be looking at 3 weeks, sometimes 2, maybe 4. Always depends on what's happening. Every county's different. But here's the overarching theme, Mark. Everybody thought it took 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. And that's when it's all gone wrong, right? That these things can actually be a great lead source because your buyers are now not waiting months and months and months. And once the deal closing, got it locked up under contract, they got something in the pipeline. Well, whether they're going to keep it or do something else, they're not waiting forever. So you're talking about a system that could be weeks, a couple of months, and there's unique tricks and tools. Sometimes we just had one, Mark, that you'll find interesting where initially, and it was just a piece of land. And initially, we thought we had to just do 2 probates just based on what the lineage was. And the title came back and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's a problem back from 1985, and you need to go do that as well. And what do we know about land? Tight numbers. Tight numbers. You mean you're talking like if you get it for 9 grand, you're flipping it for 20. Like those are just super tight numbers. So when you're dealing with a situation of now 3 probates, how do you make those numbers work when it's so tight? And so we were able to figure out how to do 3, but what was crazy was it was 1 to 1 done. We had 3 1-to-1s and we knocked it out all at the same time, sent everything all at the same time, and did 3 probates simultaneously. So the big picture is doesn't matter if it's 1 or 3 or 4, there's still creative ways to get those deals done, whether it's land, single family home, or crazy commercial land stuff in South Florida. It doesn't matter.
Now you talk about Florida quite a bit. So is that the only state you do business with? What if somebody is not in Florida, but they need some assistance in some other states? How is there anything that you can do for them?
So yeah, I'm only in Florida. I'm loving it here. I'm good in Florida. But if people needed some referrals or references to people out of state, I know people in South Carolina, in Texas, in Georgia, just thinking maybe California, Arizona, potentially New York now, just different places. I mean, at the end of the day, people will find some deals that come up in those other states. And some of those other states already have different systems. Like North Carolina, in North Carolina, if the person had been dead for more than 2 years, apparently if you have all the heirs on board, you don't need probate. And something similar happens in Texas, where if you have everybody that signs that affidavit of heirship, you don't need probate. So there's different things you have to ask your local people in those states if you even have to do this in that state, because you may not have to. But here's the thing. Florida is different. You have that scenario that comes in Florida and that person's on title, they own it, they die, there's kids, you got to go through that probate process.
Let me ask you a question. So we had a situation, this was a property up in New England where the husband and wife, the wife passed but they both were on title, but it had to go through probate. It didn't automatically go to him. Have you ever heard of that situation, and why would that have been like that?
What, and that was in like what
That was up
state?
in Vermont. So
Yeah, every state is so different with how they do things, and where things go with those states. I mean, I've just seen weird things that happen. I Every state's different.
right.
Yeah, every state's different with how they have their rules. Even like South Carolina, they have their creditor period with creditor claims 8 months. And then Florida's 3, barely 3. I mean, there's ways that are you can get around that too, but every state just has different rules, Mark.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we have actually somebody that I know passed away 2.5 years ago, and there she's from Germany, and she had no children, and they found out that she had one lost cousin, and they've been trying to track this one cousin down, and it's been going on for about 2 years. Have you ever dealt with international like that before, especially being here? I'm assuming here in Florida.
No, but it's really interesting. So, just a plug on my show. I have my own show that I have like on every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And my first guest for season 3 was Dave Day, and he actually has a new system, a new thing that he's doing where if there's people that are international and out of the country, they have a whole skip trace system that they're able to find people. So I've never seen it myself, but I think there's other investors out there that we all, a lot of the investors are in the same similar circles, but a lot of investors do different niches. And I think there's some that just find those heirs. And I've just never seen it personally. It's hard to find. I know that, but cousins are deep. Cousins are deep, 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 deep down the line, if any. And you have to really go through that whole thing. That's why if you even have a complicated one, there's genealogists that are out there that can help do searches that are not actually as expensive as you think. We have one right now where there's nobody, there's no heirs, and we have to figure out a way to get that property sold. It's really interesting, Mark, because never seen that before with 0 heirs. They did a full search, out, in, down, out, down, nobody. And it's totally wild, totally, that there's nobody, but we're going to figure out how to get the property sold. So, everybody runs through these different situations. It's just a matter of asking, right? Asking the right people like you, asking people like me. Who do you go to? What do you do when you have those cases?
So what happens if you can't find somebody like that? Like if there's no heirs, like what happens? Because I've heard like the state takes it, or what's that look like?
That's the interesting experiment thing that we're about to do, where if there are no heirs, it what they call in the law world of escheat, it goes to the state of Florida. And so now it goes to their programs. There's like certain programs it like technically goes to, but they're the heir. So they're the ones that are able to sign off through their representative or through the personal representative to actually inherit the estate, inherit the property. But for this, what we're going to try to do is figure out a way to get it sold where they're the heir and get it done. It's going to be really interesting. I'll have to go over it with you as soon as it's done and completed and give you the update. Never seen it before, but always up for the challenge.
So you mentioned about your show. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Like, how would people be able to find you? I found your LinkedIn. I'm just posted that there if they want to reach out. So why don't you tell a little bit like how somebody can reach out to you, and how you can assist them and follow you?
It's so funny, Mark, because that is the one social media platform I'm like barely on, but I'm on everything else, like everything else. Like, I'm on Instagram. Like, best ways to find me is Instagram. I love Instagram now, posting content. I'm on Facebook and YouTube. I got the channel, got videos just posting all the time. But the big thing is the show, the Al Nicoletti show, where it's Wednesdays, 8 p.m. We're experimenting with 9 p.m. Trying to see how that goes as well. But I just bring on a lot of people, a lot of investors, a lot of real estate adjacent, like people that understand self-directed IRAs. Maybe it's in real estate insurance. And there's just a variety of different things that are coming up. Like even tomorrow with people that I'm going to have that were in the military, but that have a junk removal system, just different unique niches in the real estate world. And I love talking to them, interviewing. And actually, Mark, first time tomorrow is going to be the first in-person interview in the studio, 3 camera angles, all live at the same time. I'm so excited. So it's going to be a ton of fun, and I love it.
Nice. So I know, do you have any other conventions that you're coming up to here in Florida? You're always, every time I see you, you're at some type of convention. I got one coming up in Orlando. I think the 3rd through the 6th.
What's happening there?
That it's a commercial one. I'll have to find out. Somebody invited me to along that one, so I'm actually going to that one, and then I have another one the weekend after that out in Houston. That's a multifamily one. Which one? So anything else that you have coming up for any type of?
Yeah, the one thing that's coming up is I'll be in Palm Beach next week at just a convention, a trade show that's coming up. They're supposed to have a lot of speakers there. That's the big one. That's the big thing coming up, and just hopping around, hopping on some Zooms and stuff, and maybe going to be at some other RIAs that I have lined up. And I mean, so many different things. And I don't know, I'm on tour. So I don't know if you know, like I'm actually doing the whole probate thing. I'm actually pushing the whole probate tour. But just at so many different things. I'm always posting the events as they come up, just tons of stuff. And I'm just so excited to be out there, excited to be on interviews like with you, Mark. Just building relationships is so key.
So, is there anything that I didn't ask that's kind of important that I should that you want to talk about? And a question that I might have not asked, or that you feel that it should be important. I don't know.
I would say this, the one thing that comes up a lot is investors, will hear that they really want to get into probate, and they feel like they gotta know like every little thing about it. They gotta know what's the next step, what's this, what's that, and they haven't even gotten their deal yet. They haven't even gotten a lead. They haven't even gotten a call, a warm lead, anything. And they want to know every little thing about it. And that's where if you start doing that, you're going to either overwhelm yourself or maybe you'll just find yourself in a different niche. You just got to dive in on it and figure out where to go from there and see if it's a lead that works for you and if it's an area that works for you. And I think for a while that's what happened. Like another thing that I get into is, when a foreclosure is going up for auction and the sales like next week, I get into some of those where I got to cancel and reschedule the sale. And sometimes I get calls and they'll say, well, what happens with this or what happens with that? And many times every case is different. You just got to dive in and see what happens and learn from those experiences. Either works out, it doesn't work out, and learn as those experiences come up. That is a huge tip for people that are out there that want to get into it. Just start, go, do it. Sounds basic and common sense, but you'd be surprised what's out there.
So it just sounds like the best bet is just to, once you find a property, get it under contract, and then just kind of reach out to you, and your team will actually just take care of it and go through the whole process and just treat it like a normal transaction. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Yep, you got it. And then find a way to get it to closing, build rapport and great relationships with all of us that are around you. Make it happen.
All right, Al. Well, I do appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. If anybody has any questions or anything, post it in. But otherwise, just reach out to Al. I think you also might be in one of my in my creative real estate investing group. So they can drop. You're in that post, so you can drop your contact information in there. So if anybody wants to reach out, they can definitely reach out. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will chat with you all later. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Mark.